Hi, I'm Paul Brodie. I'm back in my shop, sitting down. Mitch behind the cameras. Thank you, Mitch. I got a new shirt. I want to thank Tim. He sent it up. I think he sent one to Mitch too. He lives in Seattle. Is it a restaurant? It's a restaurant in Seattle. So thanks for the shirt, Tim. Appreciate it. What we're doing today is we're going to talk all about forks. I think where we can start, because it's going to be the evolution of the GATORBLADE, we're going to start here with, this is the Wasnot fork that I've been working on, and I'll show you a little update of what I did. I had troubles in silver soldering on the U-brake boss, so I took off this one and I cleaned it all up, and I used new emery cloth, and then I checked the fluxer, and the fluxer was a bit low. So I added some flux, and then it silver soldered fine. Now on the dropout, I want you to see what I did here. See, there's a little radius there. I took nickel silver rod, I melted it in, and then I filed it up, because now there's a transition. If I didn't do that, it's just a sharp edge and it doesn't look very nice at all. So it doesn't make it any stronger, but it sure looks better because now it has that flow to it. All right, so we're going to talk all about forks. And back in 1987, I was in the bicycle business. I started my company in 1986, Brodie Bikes, and I read all the magazines. And what I saw in the magazines was a Bontrager fork. And this is a Bontrager fork here. It's not mine. It got loaned to me by Jim Nielsen. Thank you. And basically what it does is it's an alloy crown. You've got 4 Allen screws, and you are clamping the fork tubes and the steer tube. So I got one up, and I made a bike for it, and I rode that bike. I raced that bike, and I liked the fork, so I decided that I wanted to do my own. So that's how this fork came around. When I was digging through my archives yesterday, well, last couple days, and I've got photos upstairs, I got photos over here, I got photos in the house, so it's a bit of a mismatch, but I did find a diary, and this is my diary from 1988, and it talks all about what was going on at the shop and my home life. We're not going into that at all. And what I found was that I made the first composite fork, which I believe to be this one. I made that in April of '88. So this fork is a lot like that fork over there. I machined the crown, and I believe that these holes aren't at a taper. I think they're just in line with the steer tube. That's what I think. So that fork worked out quite nicely. I don't remember riding it, but it got painted later, so there's no marks on the dropouts. And then in '88, in June of that year, so these were made in the old shop in the back of the house. I had a shop under the sun deck, and you see the apple tree on the right. I would hang a pole out over the sun deck, and I would spray paint frames right there in the neighborhood. Not proud of it now, but that's what I needed to do at the time. Then in June of '88, we moved into the new shop, and I continued working on forks. So I liked this fork, but what I really liked was the straight blades. So this was the next fork, and I've showed you this one earlier. These have to be at the right angle, because otherwise you don't get the spacing, and you can't pull. Doesn't work because this is way too strong. So I think I showed you this before. See how I had to machine out the inside of the dropouts, because otherwise I couldn't get a hub into there. So that was a bit of a not quite right. And then this is the fork off the Wasnot. So I made another fork, but this is not the fork that was first on the Wasnot. It went on another bike, and that was this bike here. So this bike here, that's where this fork first went on to. And if you notice, it's got the compost on it. So I got that off Harvey. So this got a couple of neat features on it. It's got the big U-brake as well. It's got these forks, and it was a Romax, and that bike was built in October of '88. So that was frame number 500. So that's where these forks first got used, and the spacing wasn't quite right, but I could pull it apart a little bit. It was about a millimeter or two too close. So that was the origin of these forks. That was in '88. And then now I'm building another Wasnot. So there's basically 3 forks that look all the same. And then we get onto the GATORBLADE, because what the problem with these is, as I mentioned, if you don't get all the dimensions just right, it's clamping too hard on one tube and not enough on another tube. Very hard to get it to clamp evenly. So I had an idea that I could make a fork and maybe I could bolt it from the side. It was a bit of a crazy idea, maybe. And then I was thinking, if I use one bolt, it's an 8 millimeter Allen screw. If I use one bolt, is that going to be okay? And I didn't know. I thought maybe I had to use a couple of bolts, but I didn't know. So I made a fork with one bolt, and then we had to test it. So what we did, I had an idea that if we took a 4x4 and put it on one 4x4 under the dropouts and one 4x4 under the steer tube, then we could take a big heavy chunk of pipe and smash it down on the crown and simulate a front end accident. So that's basically what we did. And this was outside the shop. And that's our front door. Now we're out in Richmond, BC. And Mitch is going to show you a photo of what the inside of the shop looks like. It was on the 6th of September '88. And we went outside. That's me with my striped tights on. That's Mike Truelove, and that's Jacques Major. So we got this huge piece of pipe, and it's a 1/4-inch wall. It's quite heavy. We put a piece of plywood, a 2x4 here, and we smacked it. We gave it a good smack. And what that showed us was it worked fine, because it buckled a little bit here, but it didn't break. And so that's what you want. You want it to deform, but not have the crown fall apart or anything like that. So that was a good sign. This is from the side, so you can see how much it bent. If I estimate, that's like hitting a brick wall at 30 miles an hour or something. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, not like that. Anyway, we were happy with that. So at the time, we had a young man working at the shop. His name was Chuck, and he was a rider. He was a racer, and he volunteered right away that he wanted one of these forks on his bikes. And I thought, you're a brave guy, I think. So, but anyway, there's his Chuck. That's what he looks like. And I think he's got his race face on there. But he was the first one to ride a GATORBLADE fork. Here's the drawing of the fork crown. So this was made later on, because this is '89, but the fork crowns I was making, all of these fork crowns I made on my lathe and my mill. These were not CNC'd at all. And one of the drawbacks having this sort of a setup, and it extends to this. This was the first crowns that got CNC machined, and it's the straight blades, spinner dropouts. The dropouts are made in Taiwan. If you look there, You can see the company name there, Spinner. So on these forks, what we had to do is to get the crowns made, and the steer tube, it was machined, so there was about a thou and a half a press fit in between the steer tube and the crown. I would put 6 of the crowns into a toaster oven for 1/4 of an hour at 400 degrees, and then I would have my welding gloves on, and then I would bring one crown out, and then I would put the steer tube in, and you had to do it really quick, because if you hesitated, it would grab and it would never go down. You could not fix that. That was a one shot. What happens sometimes is when we made the forks and we had to paint them, it was easier just to bead blast everything and paint everything one color. It looks a lot nicer if the crown is just aluminum and the blades are all painted. So that was a pain, because what we had to do was to assemble the fork and braze in the dropouts, file them up a little bit, make it smooth, and then it would get bead blasted. It would get masked off and bead blasted, and then after the bead blasting, you would have to unmask it, remask it for the painting, put it in the booth, paint it, and then unmask it. So it was a lot of work for that. So I want to show you, I found a photo. Here's the photo. This is, and I was looking at this photo a little closer yesterday. Almost all the forks here are the straight blades. There's one curved blade in there, one curved gator blade. And so you can see that we're in the transition. I think maybe at the very most we made 100 of these. I don't think we made more than 100. I think that was quite a bit. And what I want you to see is these ones are all assembled, and they got the spinner dropouts in them, and they're unpainted. So all these crowns have to be masked off. And that was something that was very time consuming, and that got taken care of later. So we'll talk about that. So this is the curved gator blade. So this is like version 1. And then we go to the CNC crown and the straight blades and the spinner dropouts. I call this version number 2. And then I did an experiment, because this is a inch tube, inch steerer tube. I wanted to go to 1.125. So this was a prototype. And you can see how I have holes down in the crown here. And I made the dropouts out of aluminum, and I glued them in. Can't remember exactly how I did that, but so I was experimenting. I was looking for a better version of this fork. So that's when we came to this one here. Actually, if we don't include the curved gator blade, this is version 1. I think this is what I did. This is going back, so my memory is not super sharp. I think this is version 1. This became version 2 because it had the new crown, and it still had the spinner dropout. So this is version 1, version 2, and then version 3 is this one here. So what I did was, I knew that all of the CNC machining, it was quite time consuming. So I elected to have a mold made and pay some money, and this became an extrusion. And so this was, I don't think it had the scoop out there. It came out a little bit, and there was no hole. It was just an extrusion. And this would come in a 20-foot length, I believe, and then get sent to the machine shop, and they would hold it, bore it. These were bored at an angle, and then the 2 holes made. This has been anodized. We didn't normally anodize them. So what happened on this one was that we got the dropouts, alloy dropouts that are pretty darn nice. And so, as I remember, we got a grant off the government for, I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000. I'm not sure how that happened. And then we contacted a machine shop. It was Sycom Industries in Surrey. And so they got the grant, and they had a machinist there, and he came up with this shape. I did not come up with this shape. That was from a grant from the government. Anyway, I really liked these, and so this was the final version. So what that meant is that we could do a mock-up on the fork blade. We could hold it into a crown, and then we slid in the dropouts because they weren't glued yet. And then we put on the bosses, mostly candy bosses at this time. And then that would get bead blasted, and then this whole blade from here to here would get sent out for powder coating. And so no longer did we have to mask off the crown and do all that. This was much easier. So the powder coat goes under the crown, and that's fine, and then these get glued in. So this was the best fork. We got the blades made by Tangay, and it was a custom tube. We contacted them through, we had an agent over in Japan at the time, and he contacted the Tangay factory, and they said, no, we don't have the mold. And I thought that they did have the mold. And so there was a period of time for a few months where I didn't think this fork was ever going to happen because we couldn't get the blades we wanted. 1.1 and then tapering down to 0.7. And the 0.7 allows a little bit of flex. Very nice. And then we got a fax from our agent in Japan, and he'd been contacted by the Tangay factory, and somehow, I don't know how, I also phoned up Tom Ritchie at the time to see if he would intervene and get the blades made, and he had the connections because he was well connected with the Tangay company, but he said that he didn't have time. And then a couple weeks later, we got this email, and Tangay had found the molds. It was like a hallelujah moment. And that's when I knew that everything was falling into place somehow. I don't know if strings got pulled or whatever. So a couple months later, we got all the blades. I think we got 700 pairs of blades. And so we started to make these forks. And so the first show we went down to with our new fork was Interbike, and I think it was in LA, and it was 1988. And what happened at that show is that we had this great fork, I thought, and then RockShox came out with their, I think it was called the RS1. And so at the show, we had a brand new fork, but the buzz was RockShox because it was magnesium sliders, and no one had really seen anything like it on that scale. So we didn't sell a whole lot of forks. And it took, I think we made 600 or 700 pairs of forks, which are collector's items these days. And it took us, I think, 5 years to sell those forks. And we sold them for $169, which was basically our cost. That was the situation then. So we went to all this work of making and designing of what I think is a great fork. And then we didn't make any money. Welcome to the bicycle business. It's great. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need. Oh, so there's the fork flopper. I didn't mention that, but it was September 6, 88, which we did the test, and we bent the fork. And then the next day, Chuck was riding on the fork, and on the 22nd of September, that's when the fork flopper went into operation. Can you see here? It's got a weight. There's a motor here, and the motor has a small pulley, large pulley here, but it would still flop at about that fast. You could watch it, and there was a big counterweight there. So this fork was just vibrating away, and it went round the clock. And it was mounted, everything was mounted on a piece of 3/4 inch plate. That's a heavy plate. And what would happen is, because of the vibration, it would walk across a concrete floor. So I had to put a bolt into the concrete, and we had it under the stairs going up to the office, and when visitors would come around, I'd give them the tour and show them the fork flopper, and it ran for months. I can't remember what actually happened. I don't think the fork broke. I think I don't know, I can't remember what happened, but it went for months. So, and also, of all the forks we made, 600 forks, haven't had a fork that ever came back that was broken or had failed. So that's a very good record, and I am proud of that. And oh yeah, I still got stuff. So in '88 we went down to the show, and then Mountain Bike Action, they were a huge magazine back then. They had so much power, it was crazy. And so they saw the fork, I think, at the '88 show, and it could have been in the fall or something like that. And they named it one of the best innovations of 1989, and it didn't have a name yet. It was called the Composite Fork. So how the name came out, I'm not quite sure, but a gator blade, you think of a gator with its teeth, and so when you're on the bike with a gator blade fork and you're in a corner, it's got bite. That's what I connected with the gator. The fork had bite in the corner. It would take you through the corner. So I think I've told you everything about the gator blade. So thank you very much for watching. Mitch and I like coffees. If you help our channel out by buying a few coffees, much appreciated. Leave your comments below. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends, and see you next time. In the 80s, in our shop, we had a fork board, and this is the actual fork board. And it's just a piece of plywood. It's covered with fabric, and there's Allen screws that come out that go into the fender mount at the back of the fork crown. So I had 7 forks up there, and then I moved out here to Langley, and this was in my shed, and the steer tubes were all going rusty. And in 2004, Jim Nielsen came by, and I was talking to him about this, and he expressed an interest. So I think the fork board at that time had 5 forks on it. I've taken some off. I think I kept this one because I happen to like this one. So I think he got the fork board with 5 forks on it, and that was 2004. He's kept it all this time, and he's always wanted it to be on show or something like that. So thank you, Jim, for keeping everything safe. And then this fork here, I don't own all these forks. This fork is owned by Steve Mitchell, and he loaned it to me. He took it off a bike so that I could show you, because I don't have one of these. These are pretty rare, apparently, because I only made about 100. So I just wanted to thank those 2 people, and thank you too for watching.